Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. Today, Anna and I get to jump into this conversation about how do we make sure that our tech is glorifying God, even in a season of COVID, even in a season of kind of feeling overwhelmed, and how do we know when is a healthy amount and how much is too much. So we're specifically today going to look at our content. So what are we watching in our time? How much of our focus and our investment are we giving to it? Tying that into kind of both of Anna and my different backgrounds growing up with technology and specifically with television and kind of movies and shows and that kind of stuff, the way our families dealt with kind of screen time, and then the way that kind of goes into where we are. Like we're kind of 2 to 3 weeks into a different season of our own lives as we look at COVID and go, man, we are trying to find our hope in some of the wrong spots. So we hope you feel encouraged in this time and challenged to look at the way you're using tech and making sure that it's not using you, and that we can help our families love God and use tech. So with that, let's get this conversation started. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gospel Tech. My name is Nathan.
I'm Anna.
And we are back again. Today we're going to be talking about our tech, and specifically how do we look at our time and our content and measure that up against the way that would glorify God and help us use tech and love God. Before we begin any of this, I want to just kind of cover some of the details. This is Gospel Tech. It's a ministry of Flint and Iron, a nonprofit Anna and I started a couple years ago, focused on sparking positive purpose in youth. And Gospel Tech is really this subset of that is focused on how do we help families love God and use tech. So this podcast is one of our major focuses. We're also on social media, so you can follow us at Flint and Iron on Instagram or at Sparking Purpose on Facebook. You can also reach out to us through those avenues. So if you want to email me, it's nathan@flintandiron.org, and Anna, it's anna@flintandiron.org. And your support is an absolutely huge encouragement to us. It's a blessing to us. And you guys have been amazing about giving reviews and rating. We have, I think, 20 right now, which is awesome for being like a little podcast. If you look around, there's people who've been around a lot longer than us that don't. And what that means is when someone Googles us, or if someone goes looking for podcasts, it just makes it more likely they're going to look for us. If they're looking for resources for tech or for hope or for raising their kids, that gives them kind of a faster way to find us, which is amazing. Another awesome thing has been some of you have been sharing these. You've been finding the link and sending that out in text or into your social media groups. So thank you for that. That is amazing, and it helps us better do the ministry we're trying to do, which is equip and encourage families. So thank you. If you have anything else, you can just direct message us or email us through those mediums. Anything I forgot?
No.
Okay. All right. So then it's icebreaker time. You feeling this?
Feeling it.
Feeling it. All right, Janice. Let's see, tech check. We're looking for tech wins. What's going well in your tech use right now, Anna?
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to talk more about this, I think, coming up, but
in this episode? Or
no, not in this episode, but I think we have some probably blog posts coming or a podcast coming talking about just managing our phone and fighting back on our phones. And so I've been reading Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism, and also John Mark Comer, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And both of those guys recommend turning off notifications on your phone. It was really painful to do. And this is just my first week of living without notifications. So like no, my text messages are
walk
off.
Through like what that means.
So not just I don't have any social media on my phone except Flint and Iron's Instagram, which I only check for work. But so I've already don't have Facebook or social media pinging at me. That has not been my problem, but I have notifications on for text message, or we have WhatsApp for community group and Marco Polo and Voxer. And so turning those off means that I am in control of when I'm going to check my phone. And instead of seeing a red little number showing up and feeling like, oh, that's creating this sense of urgency. It's just like, oh, if this is my time that I'm setting aside to respond to messages, then I can go do that instead of things popping up on my phone and just like every time I walk by, it's like lighting up or flashing at me.
So you're not getting any of the kind of behavioral triggers that are, hey, you haven't checked me recently. The little pop down notification isn't coming up.
None of those. It is really funny to see how that my brain is just, and my habits are used to doing that. So I feel like it's still taking some time because I feel like I walk over to it. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to look at it. And I'm like, oh, nothing's there.
Right.
Like it's a
you have
lot.
To actually open
I have to open
see.
my text messages to see if there's a text message. And that step of having to do that really does, like, it makes it not quite as exciting. Something about having to physically open the app really like shuts that down a little bit. And so I think that's a really good. It's not necessarily easy, but I feel like it's winning back some space in my brain.
Yeah, no,
that's a good one.
That's crazy. So, and you got this from John Mark Comer. Is that the?
I believe that one was from John Mark Comer. And then when I've been reading Cal Newport, he is not speaking from a faith background, but a very scientific background. They both talk about that.
Sure. So they're basically like the research focused and the faith focused versions of the same conversation.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
And then I guess what I want to do, I wanted to do a tech check. I did not clarify. So personally, and then as a couple, and then kind of for our family.
Oh, yeah. So that's my personal tech win. That I don't know if it's a win, but I'm in the game. I'm playing. I'm playing the game.
I'm not losing.
Yeah.
Not losing terribly.
And then as a couple, we just have established movie night. And I think that is the first one.
Was an epic win because I got to pick. And so explain what that means, because most people are like, why would movie night be movie night?
We cannot agree ever on a movie. We have a very hard time coming to a conclusion.
Yeah, we probably couldn't be more different.
Right. So we decided I really like watching movies. Nathan likes watching movies too, but just very different. We like very different movies. So to compromise on that, instead of just feeling like every time like, oh, let's watch a movie and then be a half an hour like scrolling through all the streaming service movies and then just being mad and like, why can't you just agree with what I want to watch? Clearly my choices are better. So we decided that every other week, like whatever night is movie, I think it's Saturday night is movie night. Then like last week it was my turn and I had to pick 3 options, and we're trying not to like pick real things.
Vindictive.
Right. To not be mean about it. Like I
Here's
didn't
your 3 options.
pick the Titanic because I know he does not want to watch the Titanic. So I tried to pick things that to me felt like compromises. Like not, that would be things he would like to watch too. So I picked 3 and then he got to pick 1 out of the 3. And he had the week before and he picked 3 and I picked 1. And I feel like that's been working as far as I fall asleep during every movie. So
so I end up watching these movies by myself.
I can't say I didn't not fall asleep in both of them, but that's normal.
Yeah, in fairness to you, right? Like it literally, my movie choice is basically 12-year-old boy. So like I get enough real life being in real life. So my big thing is like when I want to watch a movie, it needs to be like as far from reality as possible. So it's perfectly reasonable that she wouldn't love that. So that worked well. That's been a win.
Yeah.
Okay. What about with our kiddos?
Oh, we're still really liking the Zoom dates with our cousins for Lego play dates. I feel like that's a win.
It's like, what, 3 weeks in now? That's actually
We've
been
been
working?
doing that for a while. At least once a week, they'll play for an hour over Zoom. And it's kind of great for me because they're so happy.
Yeah.
Not that I don't want to spend every minute with my children, but I don't want to spend every minute with my children. And they get to feel like they get to see a friend. And we usually see our cousins at least once a week, and they're really missing them. So I think that's been really helpful for all of us.
So what would be different than that? I mean, that sounds like, well, you're setting your kid in a room in front of a screen. Like, why is that any different than any other form of digital amusement we might give a kid, an iPad or a game or a show or whatever?
Oh, I guess because they're engaging. So their cousin that they play with, hey, Remington, he's a little bit older than Owen, and they like will make up challenges for each other. So it's not at all passive. Like the computer is just a medium for them to see each other and feel like they have another person there to engage with, but they're not just sitting and staring at the screen. Like last week when they were playing, I'm like, are you guys even talking to each other? And they were just like minimally, oh, I'm building this now. Or, hey, look at my robot. And then one of them would say like, let's try and build this. And then they would work on that for 15 minutes and then they'll show each other. So it's just kind of like a portal to a person instead of a passive.
And the way we'll talk about that in other times, just kind of audience, so you know, we call that tool tech versus drool tech. So drool tech is anything that's going to help us consume, and we are passive in the process. It often goes along with a really high rate of stimulation, whereas tool tech is real time. So it's operating at the pace of real life. It's relational, and it's going to be creative focused. So that would be, Zoom would be a good fit there. Cool.
Do yours quickly.
Okay, mine quickly. I would say individually, my tech win was we fought through our calendar intentionally, not with each other, but with our calendar. We wrestled, I guess would be a better word, with our calendar to get a day a month where I can go away, leave the laptop, leave the smartphone, and read and pray. And some of that's coming from John Mark Comer, some of it coming from that Greg McKeown Essentialism.
Literally every book I've read in the last 2 months have talked about how important a day of silence and solitude is, or just not even a whole day, but just carving out space for that. Yeah. It's been very convicting.
It was good. So making time for that was, so my day was yesterday, and it was really good. And there wasn't like I'm not going away and specifically asking God to give me like a lightning bolt moment, but just making space for conviction, for encouragement. My big thing was, the word I came away with from yesterday was faithful. And it's that we need to just stay the course that we're on and be faithful with what the Lord's asking us to do. The second would be our couples reading night. I think we're going to get into it a little bit, but in this schedule, so instead of watching shows every night, movie night gets a specific night. And then another one of the nights is a reading night because, well,
we're going to get there.
We'll get there. But reading night has been a huge encouragement to me. And then with our kiddos, one of our evenings is pick like a board game activity, something we can do together. And this last week, I chose to do a family puzzle, which might sound terrible to you and your family, but our middle kiddo, Henry, loves himself some puzzles. And literally, we're putting together this puzzle, and we set a timer, like, all right, we're just going to do it for this amount. We'll see if we can finish. And Henry could tell us where pieces go just based on the board, because he's done this puzzle so much. Like, he'll just see a piece and like, oh, that's up there. So that was super fun for me to see that little kid thinks in pictures. So those are my 3. Yay. All right. Sorry, that was a lot of precursor for this. But today we're going to be talking about our content and our time. And in COVID, as we look at what we're doing, are we being faithful with the way the Lord asks us to spend our time, focus, heart, effort, all that in relation to our technology?
I think you need to be more specific, because we're not just talking about all technology. We're talking about TV and streaming.
Yeah, entertainment technology, I guess, because I think you could throw video games in there too. Like basically, what are we turning to for our amusement?
Sure.
But yeah, specifically TV and streaming and shows today. Thank you. That was a good pickup. So yes, that's what we're talking about. So you want to take it from there?
Yes. Well, I just want to first, before you're like turning our podcast off, because I feel like TV and streaming is like we're sacrificing the holy cow of like people. We don't want to give up our TV. It's really hard. And I just want to say that I feel you. This is where this podcast came out of, like, very recent and real conviction and conversations we've been having. And I think some of it is due to COVID and quarantine circumstances, and some of it has been something we've wrestled with our whole marriage, of trying to figure out a balance of how we're spending our time and different expectations for what we're watching and what we like to watch. And so we're going to get into some of that today, of just, this came from a place of feeling like we need something different. What we're doing isn't working. When our default had been just, we're going to put the kids to bed and then we're going to come downstairs and it's like, yay, we did it. And then turn on a show or watch something together for a half an hour, and then go to bed. And that was kind of just, I feel like we've had seasons in our marriage where we weren't doing that. But I feel like every time we've had a baby, that becomes the default really quickly. Like the whole pregnancy, just because I'm miserable during pregnancy, and then like after, you're so tired, and that's the only, like, I don't have time or brain space to think. I just want to lay here. So I feel like how they turned 1, there's a lot of factors happening at once. But like, okay, we're not in the newborn stage. Everyone's sleeping. This might be a good time for a new pattern in our life. Realizing
that, like, oh my goodness, like weeks of our life are passing by, and we still have the good intentions we want, but we're not doing any of it. Yeah. And so I think two verses that kind of set this conversation up. I think the first is coming out of 1 Corinthians 10:23-24, that all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. That all things are lawful, but not all things build up, or not all things are constructive. And that idea that our goal isn't just to not do bad things, like that God actually has a plan for us. When we talk about Ephesians 2:10, that we have been saved for good works that God has prepared beforehand for us to do in Christ Jesus, that is our goal. So that's raising our kids. That's what we're doing in our free time, which we'll address in a little bit. But that's the first thing, that it's not just, am I doing fine? It's, am I doing what God has called me to do? No more and no less. And then the second would be, with those things, we give it the Philippians 4:8 test. You'll hear us talk about this a lot, but whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, commendable, excellent, praiseworthy, think about these things. And I cut out some of the middle words there, but that's a significant list. So then we compare what we're actually using for entertainment and using for amusement and to bide time. Does it pass these things? And that's not a hypothetical list. So we go from that, and then we go, all right, let's just look at, for Anna and I, it's been our shows recently. This might be for you, your, I don't know, music, podcasts, games, whatever it is. But we're going to focus on our shows here. So you set up the context. We had our evening showtime. And is that all right if I share a little of my context?
Yes.
Because I think kind of, listeners, as we look at this, we see that our families have invested a lot of kind of direction on this. So when I was little, my parents literally came home from a trip and were like, hey, we're not going to have a TV anymore. And they didn't mean we're not going to have the physical object, but they meant we're not going to have any cable. And our house was out in the middle of the woods. So you're not going to be able to get any like antenna service out here. So probably from the age of 8 or so till I graduated from high school, so a decade, we did not have any actual like TV streaming through our house. So there was no nightly news. There was no TV on at really any point. There was no streaming services. So we watched a lot of like Focus on the Family movies. Shout out 5 Mile Creek. And I did play video games. So I had that as an option, but it was under certain parameters. And then my parents were very intentional about where we're going to invest our time, our resource, and space to make this stuff happen. So they let us pick up instruments, even though that's not a cheap thing to do. They invested in that, and they got us into areas that we were interested in. It's like, I got eventually a laser tag set, right? And Survivor Shot. If any of you have not seen that, it's amazing. We ran around in the woods and we did that, right? Things that let us be social and let us be creative and let us kind of operate within our passions and interests. We were all involved in sports and things, right, that were positive. And that was an intentional investment. So basically my childhood, I didn't see a Friends episode until Anna and I were married. And I will say, just as a side note, you're not going to get hurt by not being relevant and not knowing the modern show references. Like it's not a thing. Like if you love Jesus and you love others, you're going to be able to do that, even though you don't know what Cheers is. Like I think we watched Cheers for the first time this last year. So just as a side note to this whole conversation, but that was kind of my TV show upbringing.
Yes, and I feel like that really shaped your family experience a lot. And your ability, I don't know if your brain would be different now if you had grown up with the TV or if you would just be like a puddle, because it was like a big thing when we got married. My family, my mom and dad like had to transition because Nathan can't have a TV on the room and have other humans in the room that he's expected to talk to. And the way we grew up, it's not like TV was like, oh, we're going to like intentionally sit here and spend all this time watching TV, but it was on a lot. Like, and I don't remember as much when we were little. I know we watched a lot of TGIF. That was the good old days of
TGIF.
Good shows on Friday night. So I remember watching that. I don't remember spending a lot of time as a kid watching TV. We did play it outside a lot, but it was more just kind of a background noise. As I feel like junior high and high school is what I'm remembering more of. Like the Today Show was on in the morning, and that would just be kind of like while we're getting ready for school. And then if I would come home from school, and my mom and I would like sit and watch Oprah, and I'd do my homework in front of the TV. Like it was just no big deal for me to be doing something and have the TV on. It wasn't hard for me, and we could have a conversation like and do whatever we're doing, and something would be on in the background, or we would watch a show together at night. And so then when Nathan and I were starting to date, and like he'd come over and my dad would have the news on or whatever, and he's like trying to talk to Nathan, and he literally cannot talk. So my parents have been wonderful. Like I feel like don't really do that anymore, especially not when we're over, like with our kids. Like
Thanks, Ed and Lynn.
the TV's off when we're over, and that's kind of been an adjustment and something that we worked through a little bit. But I think that was just a very different experience for both of us growing up.
Yeah. And I would, the jury's still out on the chicken and the egg there. Like, can I not handle the TV because I was raised without one? Or was that just the way my brain was wired? My parents saw it and were like, hey, because it was getting to the stage where that would have been a thing they would start noticing in me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we, in our lives then, like that's kind of our context. And we go, all right, well, we bring that into a marriage. Everyone who's been married understands that you bring all of what is normal for you as an expectation. So from who does what in the family to what's the role of tech to, right? Like so many expectations that need to be worked through. So in this, we now have COVID, a lot of time on our hands where we have been home for 6 weeks, going on 7 here, I think.
I have no idea.
A long time. There's been more than a few days of being at home and recognizing, man, one of these things that is a challenge for us to make intentional space, not to do anything else specifically, but just recognizing that we're going to this thing as a default has been our TV watching, our streaming. And really it breaks down into 2 areas. Anna, you want to walk us through the first one?
Yes, I think the first question is just the content to evaluate what we are consuming. I think it does matter. And I think there's a lot of talk, even in some, I don't know, like I want to be careful about how I say
it. Okay, good.
Like I think they're just, even in the church, there's a lot of dismissal of content of it doesn't matter what we're watching, and a lot of I think just acceptance of things that if those things were happening in our actual lives, or you knew people who were behaving the way characters on television were watching, or speaking in that way, like that wouldn't be something that we would be celebrating. And yet when it's on the television or on our phone and we're watching it, there's a disconnect there. I think that we're being foolish if we think that what we're watching doesn't impact our hearts and impact our minds. So a lot of this was inspired from the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry from John Mark Comer. He really goes after the TV, which I appreciated and I think was really challenging for us, just to challenge the cultural norm in our lives, and if they fit into the way of following Jesus. And if we're going to say, yeah, I'm following Jesus and I want to become more like him, well, then does what we're giving our attention to match that?
Yeah, and I think that just to kind of extend that, like a lot of times we go, well, it's not that bad. So we run the comparison game like, well, it's not as bad as that show or that other thing. So we're not really looking at, is this best, or is this something that glorifies God and makes use of what I'm asked to do? It's just it's a comparison, and I'm kind of accepting it because there are worse things out there. Or we're saying, well, like either an everyone's doing it kind of mentality, or well, this is just normal. And I think a lot of those normals that we've built in, we have to start to push back against, go, well, why is this normal? Like, is this normal because it's good for us and it's progressing our ability to glorify and really to have joy in Christ? Or is it just normal because this is what everybody does? I mean,
well, especially I feel like with our children, and like how I don't think we're even aware of how hypersexualized our culture is, and they really have no idea. It's like you're trying to tell a fish it's wet, like when you talk about how sexualized everything is in what our children are seeing and teenagers are seeing. It is normal. That doesn't make it okay.
Yeah, and I think, so 2 things. One, I love this Ravi Zacharias quote. He said, our minds are to our souls what our brains are to our bodies. Our minds are to our souls what our brains are to our bodies. So everything we put into our mind right? Well, everything we put into our brain, right, then runs into how we operate in our body. But our minds are the ways that we form our judgments. So our focus matters. What are we giving our time to? What are we investing our attention to? Because we're doing something for 24 hours. And those things that we set our minds on, Romans 8 says, right? We set our minds on the Spirit. That's an active, it's a verb, it's a thing we do. So we're going to set our mind on the Spirit and out of that have life, or we're going to set our mind on the flesh. And that really is where this comes down to. So I love that picture. And you actually, could you extend for me then this idea of like, what does that mean when you look at our television or you look at shows? How does that impact you? Like you mentioned some of like the sexuality stuff being normal, but.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I feel like I don't want to say these examples. Like we've watched and enjoyed these shows but I also have like the two I'm going to say. So this isn't prescriptive, like nobody can watch these two shows I'm going to reference.
This is just two that have impacted you.
Yes, that we've noticed, like one, I think I've said this maybe before in a joking way, but really when I watch Fixer Upper, like, and I love Chip and Joanna, I'm all for it. It's beautiful. I really can't watch that show though without walking away feeling dissatisfied with our house and
a little bit of your husband.
Like, why can't you remodel my whole kitchen in an hour for $10,000? Like, it's upsetting.
Chip just gave her a bakery.
Yeah, and it's silly, and for a lot of people, maybe it's not a problem, but that really just strikes a nerve in me, and it's like brings out an ugly part that it's just not even worth it to be watching that. Like, our house is great, and I'm very satisfied, but suddenly when I'm watching that, I'm not satisfied anymore. So,
yeah. Okay.
And then I think my other one, I mean, you could argue a lot of problems with watching Friends, but one for me watching Friends is like as the seasons progress, the girls get so thin. Like by the last couple of seasons, I feel like at the beginning they're
normal looking people.
Kind of normal. I mean, they're beautiful girls, of course, but by the end of it, they're very thin. And I feel like at the end, because we've watched Friends several times, and by the end of like season 10, I'm sitting on the couch like eating brownies and cookies and looking at Jennifer Aniston and Courtney Cox like, oh, they're so skinny. Why are they so skinny? And then just feeling shame for me sitting on the couch. I'm sitting here watching you be skinny as I shove my face with cookies. Like, this is not a helpful...
Trying to eat my feelings.
Yeah, eating my feelings here. This isn't a helpful thing to do. Whereas if I'm not staring at these unreasonably... I feel like maybe the same thing as when I was a kid and you're like reading 17 magazine, looking at these models who are totally airbrushed, but you don't realize, or like they're not living a healthy life, and all of a sudden you're not happy with your own body.
Sure. So for today, this might be social media, right? Yeah. This is what a lot of us do with
17 magazine. Let me just tell you how old I am.
Let's date ourselves here. But with social media, right? The feeds, I mean, there are filters on there that make us look better. Even Zoom has a fix your facial flaws.
It doesn't do enough.
Tab. Not enough. Zoom, we'd like you to improve it.
I'd like it a little better.
But that is a thing that we can actually adjust our bodies. I think I just want to take a quick aside. This wasn't in the original notes. I went back and added this, so I apologize in advance. But a lot of times when I have this conversation with families, I go, okay, well, you talk about like the sexualization and kind of the way that's done, but what about violence? Why don't you guys care about violence? And specifically, this is often to Christians who are kind of bringing up, hey, this is really sexual in nature. This, it may not be the best content. So I guess I would address this in two parts. The first would be absolutely grotesque violence and things of that nature are well beyond the pale of what we're just morally called to do. So there are revenge movies that are all about like hunting people, like Taken, right? Like the entire point of Taken is getting after the people that took his daughter, right? And he has that great quote like, I have a unique set of skills that makes me, right? Like just that wonderful Liam Neeson voice. And all we want to see is him systematically murder these bad guys that took his daughter. And we don't even care if it's just or if it's right. We just want those people to die and die slowly, right? And so I would just say that there are things that we need to repent of, that we take enjoyment of. Jesus is very clear about this, coming out of Matthew, where he says, let's see here, let me get to it. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool. Right, this is just me driving on the freeway. Right? But he says, you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So violence is a huge deal. If you are watching a violent show and you're reveling in the violence, that is a problem. We want to make sure that we are being intentional with that. However, for the most part, violence in shows is often going to be part of the plot. It's not the goal. And most people leave that going, wow, that was really amusing, but we don't leave with, man, I really want to participate in that. Again, if you do, that's an area you're going to need to repent, especially on the revenge, anger, kind of that feeling like, yeah, we got them. I would say on the sexuality side, that's right. It doesn't even have to be just sex in a show. It's the way people dress. It's the camera angles. It's the language and the dialogue that's had that is being very suggestive, where people will watch it and go, you know what? I wouldn't mind participating in that right now. And I think that is what we have to be intentional with, that we're not just trying to say, hey, never see anything bad. We're saying, watch your heart and be intentional with what your heart is desiring because of what you're putting in. And if this is making you want to do something that is not going to glorify God, we want to be intentional. And even you're like, well, it makes me want to have sex, but I'm married, so I'll have it with my wife. Your wife or your husband should be the one who's making you want to have sex, not these outside people that are somehow inspiring you to that desire. So I guess I just want to take a side on that. If we go down further in Matthew 5:29-30, Jesus is very clear. It says, hey, if that anger or that lust is happening, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. These are not things we just keep around. I had an awesome conversation with a guy the other day, and he said, yeah, it's like flies, right? We're swatting flies in our house trying to get rid of them. Sometimes what you have to do is close the door. So thanks, Ray, from Made to Rain.
That's good.
That sometimes you have to close the door, and it's a picture of what God's asking us to do. So with our content, sometimes even though it's something we enjoy, it's just not the right space and season, and we have to close that door.
Yeah. And I think we're talking today mostly to parents, but these are conversations I think that transfer to our children. And we're in a stage where we make a lot of those content decisions for our kids, but as you have older kids, these are conversations.
Yeah, we're dealing with six and under, right?
Right. Like we very much control what they watch. But I think as kids get older and start to have more input into what they want to watch, then these are important things to be having conversations about with your children. The second issue, or not issue, but just thing to consider when we're talking about what we're consuming is our time, and how much time are we giving over in our week to TV. And this, I feel like in the things that I was reading from Comer and Cal Newport, and the amount of time that Americans spend watching TV is just, it's a little unsettling. But I really liked...
It was like 5 hours a day, right?
It's the average is 5 hours a day. And it's lower, I think he said, for millennials, but it's actually not, because they're just not watching TV. Like they're entertainment. They're
streaming, they're on their phones. Yes. It doesn't count in
right. So the number is technically lower, but it's actually higher when you look at how much entertainment.
And just to extend off that, average teen is 8+ hours a day for digital entertainment as of 2019 through Common Sense Media. So
yeah, so
as a picture.
I think that's just something really to consider, that if the average American is watching 5 hours of TV a day, 35 hours a week, that's just a lot of time. And Netflix has come out and said recently, in the last couple of years, that their biggest competition is not Amazon Prime or Hulu or any of those competitors who are streaming, it's sleep. So I feel like that is just really unnerving to know, like, it's not an accident that you can't stop watching a show. Like, it might feel like, oh man, how come I don't have self-control to not click watch next episode or keep it going? How did I just spend 4 or 5 hours or 5 days on this couch here watching this? Like, they are working hard to make sure that you can't turn it off.
Right, and
we are just turning in Fahrenheit 451 is just coming true.
And well, this is the idea of launching entire seasons at once on Netflix, right? Like that's why they drop it. Right. So you can, the idea of binge watching was invented by Netflix.
They want you to do that.
Yeah. And that is part of the culture they're building so that becomes normal and healthful in public opinion, even if it's not in reality.
Right. So I really liked, this was from John Mark Comer. He quotes Mary Oliver, who's a poet, and says that attention is the beginning of devotion. And then he elaborates to say, worship and joy start with the capacity to turn our mind's attention toward the God who is always with us in the now. And I think that we just forget that sometimes. Like, what we're giving our attention to is who and what we are becoming. And it can feel so easy to default to in this case, television. And it's just not neutral.
It's not neutral, right? And that idea that like it's not what we are called to do. So for my life, it's very easy to go, man, I have worked hard today. We made it to the end. Our kids are in bed. Like I deserve, and then insert that blank. Like I deserve this time where I get to do this. And that while it's great to have activities we enjoy, so maybe this is something you guys are perfectly healthful on, this is not an issue for you, then we're not speaking to that. I think you could assess that pretty quickly here, but Paul gives us a standard for that. It says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. It's out of Ephesians 5:15 through 16. The best use of the time, I think, is the standard we have to use. Is this the best use of my time for some of us? Yeah, like we're going to enjoy a show. Again, Ann and I have a movie night, and we believe that's the best use of that time to enjoy this visual story together and move on. But 6 or 7 nights a week, that's probably not the best use of time. So for us, we're going to pray through that. And there's going to be seasons where it might be none, right? And there's seasons where, like in December, when everyone got the norovirus, where there was a lot more movies in our life. So I think being intentional with that best use of the time.
Yes, and kind of going along with that, our days are numbered. I think
there's kind of there's three subparts on that. Yeah. So how do we know if it's the best use of our time? Like, what's our motivation for that?
Okay. So just to remember that our days are numbered. We don't get to know how many days or years we're going to have here. And I know I often forget that. And I think just being mindful of that and just submitting that to the Lord of what do you want me to do with these days? Yeah.
And not to get too morbid on that, but we have personally experienced in our lives friends with tragic early ends to their life on earth. And I think when I look back on that, I just go, man, like if today were to be my last one, I don't want to live frenetic and kind of crazy and like never taking any caution or planning for the future, but making sure that I'm laying that groundwork because this life isn't the end goal. Like we're allowed to participate in God's mission in this life so we can bring him glory and we can have joy. But when we cross over and we get to the end of that race, we want to make sure that our time here was not wasted and that the seeds that were planted were done in faith and that God's going to use those and make them grow even without us. So I think learning to number our days is a nice, quick reality check that we're not infinite, we're not eternal. Well, I guess we will be one way or the other, but we're in this life, we have finite limitations and that we need to trust God with it. Mm-hmm. I think an extension of that, the idea that we're fleeting, then I'll just go with that. So I love as for man, his days are grass. He flourishes like a flower of the field. The wind passes over it and it is gone, and its place knows it no more. Psalm 103. That's not even Ecclesiastes. That's just him trying to like worship God and recognize, man, God, like you can even use someone who's just a flit on the screen of history on the giant band of infinity, right? That we are just a absolute speck, and yet God will use us. And so recognize that we're here but a little bit. I think I did. I gave a shout out to some Macbeth here, right? So Macbeth recognizing his mortality and mistake, that life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more, is a beautiful picture for what we are, right? We don't want to picture ourselves being more important or more in control. And sometimes our escapism is an attempt to control.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing to remember is just that our time is not our own. 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20 says, "You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body." We are called to just use our time and our days well and to use them intentionally. So I think just kind of we're going to get into some practical conversations that you might have with your spouse or with your family. And we're not saying don't ever turn on your TV. We just want to consider challenging the default. Like for us, it was very much the default was just get to 8:00 and what can we watch? And that was becoming very normal and easy for us. So we just want to challenge that and challenge what we're watching. So,
and I think coming out of that, this isn't like super easy. Like it's not like every single night when the kids are in bed, we're like, yes, no TV. Like we have to actively choose right now. We're only 2 weeks into this new system, or 2 or 3.
I think we're 2 or 3 weeks in.
But it still takes intentional effort. And each time it's over and we're going to bed, we're like, yeah, that was good. Like, I'm glad that happened, but it's not the easiest choice. So I guess please be sensitive to yourself and your life and your relationship where you're at.
Something that's really helped though when we first started having this conversation was like, oh, we need a limit and we want to limit how much TV we're watching, was to set a schedule. And I feel like this would be helpful for children also, as if your kids are old enough to be a part of this conversation of, it eliminates the negotiating every night of what are we going to do and who gets to decide and how are we going to know which night is a TV night. Just have a schedule, like Sunday through Saturday. What is every night going to be? Which nights are TV or movies or whatever. So for us, we know that Monday nights in this weird COVID COVID season of quarantine.
There's the word.
We're watching John Krasinski's show comes out
Some good
Sunday
news.
night, but so we watch it Monday night, and then Dude Perfect usually releases Mondays. So we watch
Again, the 12-year-old boy in this relationship.
Yeah, but I'm happy to watch those things. So that is our Monday night. Like, it's maybe 40 minutes. And then Saturday night is movie night. So we know that. And then the other things that are kind of a rotating schedule for us are a reading night. We're trying to do an at-home date night. We have community group over Zoom one night. And I have a book club that we meet with over Zoom one night. So it has really helped to just have the structure. So it's not a conversation we have to have every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as you're building that, then like also having the conversation kind of about, hey, where is our tech? Like, when are we using tech solo? Mm-hmm. So playing games, watching shows on our own, and why are we doing that? If spouses are watching shows separately, I think just being really intentional about, like, it's perfectly fine to have interests of your own. Anna watches, oh man, all the depressing shows.
I don't really watch that many, but if I watch something depressing, I do watch it on my own. What I watch on my own, this is what sparked the fight, is because I really enjoy Jimmy Fallon. Not every guest, but I usually watch the monologue. And Nathan doesn't care, which is fine. But I feel like, well, I'll watch the monologue. And if there's a guest that I like, then I'll maybe watch that. So I just watch that. I feel like that's really what I watch on my own.
What was the one with the family?
Self-Made.
Oh, Self-Made.
Oh, yeah, I did watch Self-Made.
What's the one?
That was okay. I mean, I don't want to say a show and then have it be like, I don't know.
What's the triplets one?
Oh, no.
Not Parenthood.
This Is Us.
This is us. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Sorry for those of you who were like shouting at the,
I know. I'm like
the podcast.
Brain dead. This Is Us. I watched by myself. And at the end, I watched with my parents because we canceled Hulu. So I didn't have a way to watch it.
Rats. But that idea of having the conversation, if you're watching them independent, why is that? Is that the best thing? Making sure you have time to be intentional about asking each other, like, where is God working? How are you guys seeing opportunities to repent and to revel in what God is doing? And really that being the focus. So the goal here is not simply get away from your televisions and magically things will go well. Like, my childhood was still full of mistakes and errors that I made, even though I didn't have television. So it didn't make me good. It just made fewer distractions so that I could build some healthier habits for me. Because as my life has progressed, this turns out this was a thing for me, right? Like, even my gaming got out of hand, which was one of the few tech outlets I had. And that as an adult was something I had to address. So I think that is just an area we want to encourage you in. So after all that, there was a lot of information there. I hope you hear this idea that we want to keep pushing back against just the defaults of, well, I go to my show or my game or my outlet because I deserve this and because it's something that I need to make it to tomorrow. If you are in that season of survival, we want to pray through that. And we want to ask God, what is the best thing to be doing to equip our hearts and our minds, to love God, to use tech, to raise our kids, to know that God is good, not just that we need to be safe with tech. Like, that's great, but it needs to be more than that. There needs to be a God who loves them and has a purpose for them. They're being saved for something, not just kept safe from the bad, scary stuff out there. We're not trying to make a digital boogie monster. We are trying to make a God who is much bigger than a lot of the fake fun that is available to us through our technology. So, anything else, Anna? And then we may have forgotten?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. Please remember to rate and review. Please write us questions. We love hearing from you, and we love being able to respond individually. And we look forward to continuing this conversation as we work to raise kids who love God and use tech. So good.
I think it's because I feel like I look so ugly. I have a hard time. I can't do I don't know how you do that. Like,
How do you handle being ugly all the time?
You're not recording right now, are you?
Oh, I definitely am recording right now. We had just done the mic check. You said you were ready.